Speak on a show, episode 7. Help me understand 1619 Project, history or his story, in the mind, body, and soul segment. Let's go. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Speak On It. I am your boy, R.W. Coolins. First and foremost, giving honor to God who allows me to come at you in this manner on a weekly basis. How's everybody doing out there? Hopefully everybody's safe. Hopefully everybody is, woke up this morning in the right mind and everything like that. But let's go ahead and get these formalities out the way. Social media, rwcoolins.com. That's the website. Go there, find all the information you need, all the information you want about the show. It's all there. No problem. Spreaker.com and iTunes, Apple iTunes. That's where you can get the audio, download the audio after the show, and you can go back and listen to audio only if you choose to. We're broadcasting live on Facebook and YouTube at this particular time. So if you want to join in, we'll get to that in a minute. Fake Jackson, good morning, sir. Appreciate your support. Maurice Wigfall, good morning, bro. Appreciate your support. So social media, find me anywhere, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, RW Coolins, all those locations. We're going to get into that a little later on, as far as what we got coming down the pike. Call in number 844-904-2665. That's 844-904-2665. No matter what the situation is, let your voice be heard. And all we ask on the Speak On the Show, say what you mean what you say. Say what you mean and mean what you say. If you decide to call in, if you decide to chime in, if you decide to send a message, however you choose to do it, let your voice be heard. Say what you mean what you say. I don't even know where to start, y'all. I don't know where to start. I got some information we're going to pass on. Don't get me wrong. But I don't know where to start on this Help Me Understand Saturday. It's a help me understand type. And by helping me understand, hopefully it'll help you understand. So that's where we're at this morning. It's a lot of things going on. But first, we want to send our prayers out to all those who were affected in Texas by the snowstorm. First, started with snowstorm, ice storm, things like that. People lost power, people lost water. There's a lot of things going on in Texas that a lot of people, it's going to take some time to recover. I've seen videos where people had water, burst pipes, bringing roofs down, chandeliers leaking, all these different things you can think of that could go wrong because of this snowstorm did. However, if you're in a place where you get snowstorms on a consistent basis, like the East Coast, Maryland, where I'm born and raised, Frederick, Maryland, shout out. But if you're in these places like that and you're used to snowstorms, and then you see something like this in Texas, you have to understand that when a snowstorm hits Texas, their infrastructure is not supported with snowplows, salt, different things like that. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is that the power grid. When we get into the power grid, and I don't know all the details, but I'm gonna tell you what I know, what I understand to know. Let me put it that way. But with the power grid, they're independent. They're not on the whole United States power grid as has been mentioned. However, the way it's set up is they're independently structured. 90% of it, windmill power, all the renewable energies and everything. And then there was rumors coming out that people were saying that the windmills are the reason why people didn't get power, because the windmills froze up. But you have windmills in Antarctica, you got them all around the world in different cold locations where they still work. under those conditions. Now, let me clear something up for you, and this is something that I read. When they decided to go in this independent way in Texas with this structure, with their infrastructure, with the power grids, what I've read was, and what I found out in my research, was that when they did this, they decided to not pay the money in order to winterize the systems, particularly the windmills and the different things that they need to use. They did not winterize them. They did not pay the money to winterize it, which is the cause and effect of what happened when they got this snowstorm. Because most people will say it doesn't snow in Texas like that, so why do we need it? It doesn't get that cold in Texas, so why would we need it? But I'm gonna give you a little story. Not that it's an in-depth story, but a little something. December 11, 1984, I joined the Air Force, and I went to San Antonio, Texas for basic training. During that time between December 11th, when I got there, up until I think I left there sometime in January, 6 weeks, we got a foot of snow. And during that time, I was sheltered because I was on the base, with the military training and everything like that. So I don't know what went on outside of there, but I know on the base, we weren't moving. We weren't doing a lot of things because the infrastructure, as I mentioned, they do not invest in snow plows, trucks, salt, that type of thing. But this was back in 1984, and we got a foot of snow in 1984. This is 2021. Now, I understand, you hear some cities talk about the 100-year flood, where it may come, every 100 years they get a flood and all these type things. But there's no excuse when you come up with these things, when you cut corners and costs with something that you fund everything else. And I'll go into it. You'll fund taxpayer pay cuts for the wealthy. You'll fund different things that are not affecting the masses, but you won't put the money up front to protect the masses when it's something in this natural disaster that could happen that you're not sure that will happen, but you need to take those precautions so it does not happen. Or if it does happen, that you have these things in place to take care of that. That's all I'm saying. I'm not going to keep riding on that, because it's just one of those things where we see the government cuts corners, and it's just Texas. Texas is the ones that cut the corner. It is not a federal government thing. It was a local Texas politicians type thing. Good morning, Big Tone. Good morning. Appreciate the support, bro. Appreciate the support. So with that being said, let's talk about Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Now, people would wonder, people will say, R.W. Coolins, he didn't do anything wrong. I'm not going to say he did anything wrong. You choose to go on vacation to Cancun, no matter what the weather conditions are that's going in your home, in your home state, and what's happening with your constituents, that's on you. But where my problem comes in, and where I have the biggest problem with Ted Cruz at this moment, because I've had different opinions about him in the past, but where my problem comes in at this point is where you have Ted Cruz, a senator from this great, so they say, state of Texas, and what's up, Big D-Cam? Appreciate you, bro. Appreciate the support. Appreciate the support, bro. So, Ted Cruz, I don't have a problem. Go to Cancun. Go to Cancun. Here's where my problem comes in. How many lies are you going to tell to try to cover the fact that you were going to Cancun? First, you said it was your daughters wanted to take a trip because they were out of school, so you decided to take them. Then you said you were going because you were just going down to drop them off, and then you were coming right back. Then it was while you were on the plane, you had different thoughts and said, maybe this is not a good idea. But then there's some things that came out on your wife's side, the one that former President Trump called ugly, and then you still choose to support him, but that's neither here nor there. But I just wanted to put that out there. But here's where it gets a little muddy, because you're saying one story, but the friends of your spouse, wife, who were invited to come along on the trip, which was planned accordingly and at a certain time, because of the freezing, because y'all didn't want to be cold, you didn't have any power per se. Those text messages that she sent came out, and now it's looking like, what's going on, Ted? What's the deal? What's the deal? Good morning, Michelle Long. Appreciate the support. Good morning. So it's not the fact of you went to Cancun. I don't care where you go, but it's the fact of lying about what your plans were when you decided to go. That's where I think most of our problems come in, most of us looking from the outside looking in have a problem with it. And I found this quote by Albert Einstein that fits this situation so perfectly because, as I always mention, I don't know Ted Cruz personally, so I can't judge him on what his heart says or what he means by when he says something, or I don't know him in that manner to say that. But when you lie and you do the things that you've done with this presidency that just left office and all the different things that you spoke out about with the insurrection and all the things you can think about that Ted Cruz has said up to this point. This quote here encapsulates the full context of what I feel deals with Ted Cruz and other politicians and people in your life, more than likely. It's by Albert Einstein. And he says, whoever is careless with the truth in small matters cannot be trusted with important matters. Let me say that again, because I think y'all need to let that resonate, marinate in your mind juices, in your brain juices for a minute. Whoever is careless with the truth in small matters cannot be trusted with important matters. Albert Einstein. He made it worse than he needed to be. He should have just said, I decided to take my family to Cancun because, the weather here in Texas, we don't have power and everything. So I decided to pack them up and go to Texas. And people are going to still have an opinion. But not only were you being honest with yourself, but you were being honest about why you were going. That's all most people ask. That's all people ever want to hear. I got to change this light around a little bit. That's all people ever want to hear. That's it. But when you start injecting untruths, let me say untruths, not to call lies, but untruths into this equation, this is what happens. So transitioning from him and Texas, as I say, send our prayers out to Texas. Hopefully people are getting water, people get power back on, everything is coming into play. Hopefully they get some warmer weather so they can clear up, get all that together. But the pictures, of the houses with the pipes busting and all that, it's going to be a long recovery for those people down there. And then I seen something. Let me see if I have it. There was something that I read, and I just glanced at it. But in Texas, because of the way this power grid is set up, everything as far as your electric bill is controlled by market value. It's controlled by market values, supply and demand per se. At this point, I seen an article where they said people, because they have a credit card set up where it automatically deducts, you know how that works. But there's people who are being charged or could be charged up to $10,000 for the electricity. Why? Because it's controlled by the market. And right now the supply and demand is high. So when the supply and demand goes high, your prices go high. So they're saying that some people could be facing $10,000 in electric bills, even though, and in spite of the fact that the electricity in their home may not have been working this entire time. That's what this infrastructure they have about the power grid in Texas is doing to people at this time. Help me understand. There were two female general officers scheduled to be promoted. They were scheduled to be promoted during President Trump's time, probably about the last month, 2 months, something like that is what it said. And what they did at the Pentagon was they held back. They held back from putting them up for promotion because they did not want, or they had the thought that former President Donald Trump would redline them being promoted. Now, I didn't read all the details in there, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say because of past actions that we've seen former President Trump do and go through and how he handles things, they didn't think that he would approve of two women being promoted in the general ranks to oversee certain areas, high visibility areas within the military. So they held off putting them up for their promotion, which was duly earned. They delayed promoting them until the former President Trump got out of office because they know they would have a better chance of and no problems getting them through with President Joe Biden. What does that say about the people we're electing into offices when you have to delay a decision, because of not the person is not qualified, but because they're either a male or female, what they look like, what their color is, any of those things, and we're delaying it just because. People who know this and people who voted for Donald Trump, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, you vote for who you want to vote for. But my problem comes in when you see things like this and you don't speak up and you still choose to support it, knowing how he feels and knowing how he's treated women in the past. What will make you think he was going to change now? So these two women who have done their military service, which, you know, he got out of, that were due to be promoted, had to wait. Not because of something they did, but because who may have done something to prevent them from getting the promotion that they duly deserved. There's a problem there. Marvin Johnson, good morning, bro. Appreciate the support. L. Harwell, appreciate the support. Good morning. So when you talk about those things like that and you hear these things come up later on after this person is out of office, it really makes you look at things a little differently. Now, this week, and I'm going to get into just the last thing I'm going to touch on right now. This week, Joe Biden did a town hall. President Joe Biden did a town hall. And in that town hall, he talked about a lot of different things. But the one thing that jumped out at a lot of people was when he talked about the vaccine. He was talking about the vaccine and getting it out and people not being able to get to the vaccine and them coming up with a plan and all these different things. But he said something that a lot of people grabbed onto and they held onto. He was asked by someone in the audience, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have it per word, but he was asked about the vaccine, how they're going to go about rolling it out, how they're going to get it out, and how are they going to get it to the people in, you know, the impoverished communities, people of color communities, those type things. And he said something to the effect that a lot of the people, blacks and Hispanics, African-American Hispanics, however you want to call it, do not know how to get on the internet. And he paused and he said, they don't know how to get on the internet and they don't know how to get online to get in line to get the vaccine. Now I'm paraphrasing, but that's the basis of it. But what it was twisted around in the media by certain people was that he said that blacks and Hispanics, African-American Hispanics, do not know how to get on the internet. They don't know how to work the internet. That's not what he said. He said they don't know how to get on the internet in order to get online, as he said, to get in line to get the vaccines at the Walgreens or wherever it needs to be. Picking and choosing those words. Now, people will say they did the same thing with Trump. Yeah, they did to a certain extent, but some of the things that he said, there was a basis for it. When Joe Biden said this, and I went back and listened to it about 3-4 times just to be sure that I heard what I heard when I heard what I heard. Yeah, like that. A lot of herds in there. But I got the gist of what he was saying. I took no offense to it because I've mentioned it many times before when this pandemic first started. And I said, in our communities, there are a lot of people that can't afford internet. There's a lot of people that don't have home computers. And I was talking about the schools, the kids getting educated, being online schooling. So it gravitates to the same thing that I was talking about then. When you got people, you have folks that their kids may have the knowledge to be able to get online and do those things and go through it. But some adult, mid-level adults, don't know how to go on the internet in order to get into those programs to make their appointments to get the vaccine. It's that simple. But they twisted it to make it seem like he said black and brown people, people of color in these neighborhoods don't know how to use the internet. That's not what he said. I just want to clear that from my perspective anyway. Take it how you want to take it. But at the end of the day, people are always going to take your words, switch them to what they want them to be, hear what they want to hear, and at the same time, use it for whatever they want to use it for. Teresa Potter Begg. Good morning, Rod. What's going on, Teresa? Appreciate your support. Love you. Appreciate your support. So now we're going to get into the 1619 project. Now, this 1619 project is something that is controversial to some folks. Let's just be honest. The 1619 project is something that's controversial to some folks, but I got a lot of information that I'm going to pass on to you, and I'm going to give you the gist of it, what it's about, and then I'm going to tell you where the arguments come in about trying to rewrite history as we know it from 1776. The 1619 Project is a special initiative of the New York Times Magazine launched in 2019. It was to mark the completion of 400 years since the first enslaved Africans arrived in colonial Virginia's Jamestown in August of 1619. It consists of 30 written and visual pieces by journalists, poets, playwrights, authors, and artists. It examines how social structures that developed in the United States as a consequence of slavery affect present-day laws, policies, systems, and culture, and the contributions of Black people in America's nation building. The project is the brainchild of Nikole Hannah-Jones. She is a MacArthur Grant winning journalist with the New York Times Magazine. She also was awarded a Pulitzer Prize for her commentary in 2020 for her work on the 1619 Project. Now, let me give you my understanding of what this 1619 Project is. And I got more information I'm gonna pass on, but in 1619, as it was mentioned, between 20 and 30 Africans were brought to the United States soil, which was not the United States at the time, but the America soil, as slaves. They were used as slaves. They were brought here in Jamestown, Virginia. And from that time of 1619, when the slaves first arrived, the first slaves arrived here on this continent, up until, 1776, when the United States became the United States with Declaration of Independence, that event, Independence Day. Slaves helped to build this country to become the United States of America. Now, with this 1619 Project, it goes back to that time and tries to encapsulate everything from 1619 and the 400 years after, and how the things that happened from 1619 up until the day have affected us as far as, and as I just mentioned, present day laws, policies, systems, and culture, and the contributions of Black people in America's nation building. What it does is it goes into depth about what part African Americans, Black, because you had to say African Americans at the time, because they were Africans that came here as slaves, 20 to 30 initially. And they came here and they were the ones that were enslaved to start building this country as we know it today. It goes back that far, but the history of the United States starts at 1776. This is where the problem comes in for some folks, that they're trying to rewrite history and the way it is. I'm not sure. That's why you had these things out here. I'll go out on a limb and say this. Everything we know to be true from the history we've been taught, the things that we've been told throughout our history books and things like that, started 1776 with the discovery and the United States of America becoming a country. When you talk about 1619, they're talking about not that the country was established at that time, but the country was beginning to form to become a country under the work of the slaves at that time. So the history of the African-American Black in this country, you only see them talk about from 1776 on, and the slavery and things like that, but they don't talk about the initial slaves that came in 1619. That's where the lesson is. That's where it starts at. And that's what they're trying to get across. Morning, Brian Hoodie. Good morning. Good morning, sir. Appreciate your support. Appreciate your support. So in that, Hannah-Jones says in her introductory essay for the 1619 Project, which has annoyed conservatives and some historians, just as I mentioned, she suggests that America's founding leaders sought freedom from the British Empire, largely, watch this now, largely to preserve the institution of slavery and not for lofty ideals. So basically what she's saying there is that, leaving England and the empire of what Britain had, and the people that came to the United States did not come here specifically for the lofty goals that they talk about. They did not come for the lofty goals they talk about. They came to preserve the institution of slavery, which is why you have the historians, the conservatives, excuse me, in an uproar about the 1619 Project and how it's written, was being said. Good morning, Brenda Gray. Appreciate your support. Appreciate your support. So that's where the discussions come in, because they're saying that this country, as we always hear, that, you know, they were coming here, they were trying to get away from the Britain rule, and they were trying to have these lofty ideas what they want to do. But some people in this 1619 says it was to preserve the slavery that was going on here and how they were building this country. In an essay excerpt from Hannah Jones, it says this: in other words, we may never have revolted against Britain if some of the founders had not understood that slavery empowered them to do so, nor if they had not believed that independence was required in order to ensure that slavery would continue. It is not incidental, watch this now, it is not incidental that 10 of this nation's first 12 presidents were enslavers. And some might argue that this nation was founded not as a democracy, but as a slaveocracy. Not as a democracy, but as a slaveocracy. So when you hear these things that are in here and how it's written, it really makes you think back to the fact that, okay, we always hear about, and I'm not good with the history of how, you know, the colonies and all that kind of stuff, but I'm gonna touch on it, what I know to be true and what I've been told. But I ain't gonna say no be true, but what I've been told. So basically in this, what they're saying is that if you have 10 of the first 12 presidents of the United States of America, when it was discovered in 1776, had slaves and still enslaved people, kept slavery like it was from 1619 before 1776, was it about becoming a democracy or a slaveocracy? These are her quotes, not mine. I'm just saying. But when you look at it that way and you ask it, you see why people are in an uproar, because there's nothing worse for some folks than to question the forefathers about what their intentions were, you know, why they kept slaves. You know, you go back to the monuments that have been built over time about what these people did and how they treated certain people because of the color and everything like that. But at the same time, you hear our politicians, when things come up, when they're trying to pass laws and trying to do this and that, and they always go back to, well, the forefathers' thought process was this. But you never hear them talk about what the forefathers' thought process was in keeping slavery alive after 1776, when the United States became the 13 colonies. Something to think about. Now, I'm not saying everything in here is right. I'm not saying everything in here is wrong. I'm not saying the history is right of what we know to this day, and I'm not saying it's wrong. But there's always parts of history that are left out, not because, you know, it's not important, but it's because it's not important to those who are writing the history. Just something to ponder, something to think about. So the 1619 Project has a curriculum. You can find it online. I'm gonna post it a little later on. It's a PDF, and it's about 100 pages in this PDF that talk about the 1619 Project. And it says, in conjunction with the 1619 Project's release, the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting created free online lesson plans centered on the project's 30+ essays and creative works. The curriculum's goal is not, watch this now, the curriculum's goal is not to replace standard social studies, but to enhance it in areas that don't adequately talk about the institution of slavery. According to creators, a 2018 report from the Southern Poverty Law Center found popular history textbooks failed to do this. So what they're doing is they're trying to fill in the blanks of history of where slavery played a vital role in the building of this United States of America. How can you be upset with that? Are you upset because of you're using, or people will understand that slavery was the, you know, having slavery here in the United States was what built this country, the infrastructure of this country? Or is it one of those things where you hear people say is it's a black eye on the United States and they really don't want to talk about it? Which one is it? Because at the end of the day, when you fill those pockets in, it gives you more understanding of the processes and the mindsets of the people who kept slaves. Lesson plans are designed for students to evaluate historical events discussed in the 1619 Project, challenging readers to reframe their understanding of U.S. history by considering 1619 as the start of this nation's story. Now, that's where the problems come in with the curriculum. That's where, you got a lot of, and I'm going to get into some of the things that have been said about this. You got a lot of people that have a problem with this history being taught, being brought into schools. Some schools have accepted it, some haven't, but they also mentioned, and I'll get into that a little later, that President Trump even said that any schools that are teaching this curriculum will lose funding. Now, it's not his call because that's a state-run institution. However, it's just the threat of it. And then you have to ask your question, have to ask the question, what is the threat? What is the threat of having more knowledge than you already have? What is the threat of knowing exactly the 5 W's, as I like to say, the who, what, when, where, and why? What is the threat of knowing that? We always talk about knowledge is the key. But what is the threat about having more knowledge and the understanding of what this country was built on? Just makes you wonder. In the 1619 Project, I'm going to get into some of the curriculum right now. It says 1619 is not a year that most Americans know as a notable date in our country's history. Those who do are at most a tiny fraction of those who can tell you that 1776 is the year of our nation's birth. What if, however, we were to tell you that this fact, which is taught in our schools and unanimously celebrated every 4th of July, is wrong, and that the country's true birth date, the moment that its defining contradictions first came into the world, was in late August of 1619. Now, that's the opening paragraph of the curriculum. The opening paragraph lays it out for you from the beginning, and I think that's where a lot of people, some people, have a problem with it, is because in that beginning statement, it goes into saying, what if 1776, the year that they told you was the birth year, is not true? What if I told you 1619 was beginning of this country rather than 1776? And then people get in the uproar like, wait, whoa, you're trying to change something here. You're trying to say, it's like somebody telling you your birthday is different than what it actually was, which happens sometimes because birth certificates back in the day and everything like that. But let's go on. Though the exact date has been lost to history, that was when a ship arrived at Point Comfort in the British colony of Virginia, bearing a cargo of 20 to 30 enslaved Africans. Their arrival inaugurated a barbaric system of chattel slavery that would last for the next 250 years. 250 years from 1619 to 1776, 250 years. I mean, I'm sorry, not from 1619, 1865, excuse me, Emancipation Proclamation. So this is sometimes referred to as the country's original sin, as I mentioned, the country's original sin. But it is more than that. It is the country's very origin. Out of slavery and the anti-Black racism it required, grew nearly everything that has truly made America exceptional. Its economic might, its economic might, its industrial power, its electoral system, diet and popular music, the inequities of its public health and education, its astonishing penchant for violence, its income inequality, the example it sets for the world and as a land of freedom and equality, its slang, its legal system, and the endemic racial fears and hatreds that continue to plague it to this day. The seeds of all that were planted long before our official birth date in 1776, when the men known as our founders formally declared independence from Britain. There you have it. Now I'm not going to read all this. This is the first part of it, but it's basically breaking it down to the point of everything that happened from 1619 to today. has been influenced by the first arrival of slaves in 1619. And it's still being influenced today. As I mentioned, the Electoral College, the industrial power, popular music, economic might, diet, the inequities of its public health and education. All these things have been influenced by the first slave's arrival in 1619. But from 1619 to 1776, we have no true understanding of what went on in this country before it became the United States of America. What the 1619 Project tries to do is fill in those blanks. And as I mentioned, when you start filling in those blanks, it gives you a better understanding of the overall picture, why things are done the way they do, why we continue to see things being done the way they are done. But if you leave those blanks out and you have those gaps, then you fill in the gaps with what you think may be true rather than the facts of what is actually true. Now you have where people don't want to fill those gaps in because it changes the dichotomy of the true understanding of what this country was built on and why slavery lasted from 1619 until 1863, 1865, whichever date you want to go when he signed it, and then when everybody found out it was true, that slavery had ended. 250 years of slavery. If this country, by reading this, was about the democracy when they left England, then the first question I ask that comes to my mind, if you were leaving the regime of Britain because you didn't like the way things were being done, how things were being taken care of, or how you were treated there, but then you packed up and came to a country that you say you discovered or was discovered in 1776 and started the 13 colonies and everywhere, and you seen slavery was something that was being done in this country, inhumane to the people that were here and brought here to build this country, but you continue to let it go on from the time of 1776 until 1865, what does that say about what your true intentions were when you came here? And that's not even putting into the equation the American Indians that walked the face of this soil at that time as well. All this comes into play. All this is relevant. The 1619 Project, that's what we're talking about. So it says, alongside the essays, there's essays in here. It says, you will find 17 literary works that bring to life key moments in African-American history. These works are all original compositions by contemporary Black writers who were asked to choose events on a timeline of the past 400 years. The poetry and fiction they created is arranged chronologically throughout the issue, and each work is introduced by the history to which the author is responding. Then it has this on here. A word of warning. There is gruesome material in these pages. Material that readers will find disturbing. That is, unfortunately, as it must be. American history cannot be told truthfully without a clear vision of how inhuman and immoral the treatment of Black Americans has been. By acknowledging this shameful history, by trying hard to understand its powerful influence on the present, perhaps we can prepare ourselves for a more just future. That is the hope. That was hard. That is the hope of this project. Now, here's the 400 years literary timeline. I'm going to break this down to you real quick. The 400 years literary timeline. It discusses the Middle Passage, Crispus Attucks, Phillis Wheatley, which most of you probably have never heard because I never heard of her. Phillis Wheatley. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1793. Gabrielle's Rebellion. The Act prohibiting importation of slaves. Black Seminoles, which would have been the Indians. The Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. The New Orleans Massacre of 1866. And it's something that I'm going to try to get some information out to you about. The Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Sergeant Isaac Woodard. The 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. The Black Panther Party, as we discussed last week. The birth of hip hop. Reverend Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition speech. And the Superdome after Hurricane Katrina. So it brings you through the 400 years of history of the African-American Black in the United States of America on American soil before it became the United States of America, 1619 to 2021. That's what it encapsulates. And it fills in those blanks that we've always, they always say, we've always heard them say, if you don't know your history, you really don't know where you're going. And they also, if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it. Well, it's time to fill in those blanks. It's time to get that understanding. And I will encourage each one of you, because like I said, I'm going to post this on my site, on my page, the R.W. Coolins page on Facebook. So you can go and look at it. It's 100 pages, but you can go through it and look at it and get a better understanding of what this 1619 project was all about, and judge for yourself if this was something that needed to be said, needed to be told. Is it something that's just trying to shake up the structure of what this country is to be known as? Or is it something that we need to truly integrate into the education system so our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren have an understanding of what part slavery played in this country? Rather than just being slaves, what did the slaves do to this country and for this country to make it what it is today? And how is that from 1619 on still affecting us right now, economically and otherwise? These are things that I think need to be taught. And it's not only for African-American and Black kids. It's for white children as well. They should understand what part slavery played. They should just not know that a slave was out there, picking cotton and in the fields, and they got whipped and sold and different things like that. Give them the basics. Give them the core of what this country was established with slavery and what the slaves did in this country before they became out of bondage. These are the things that I think, from my perspective, people need to really look at, rather than being upset that these things in history happen and we're going and we're talking about them, we're putting them on the forefront, rather than go and try to debunk everything that's being said about what is in this 1619 project. Why not go and find what is incorporated in the 1619 project that needs to be incorporated in the history books that we teach on a daily basis to get people to truly understand the plight and the struggle of the African-American Black person in this country that still goes on today, and to understand where it started from and why it is still relevant. Those are the things that I look at. Those are the things that I ask. Those are the things that when we sit back and we really think about it, and you hear the phrases about the angry Black man or the angry Black woman, or you guys are always mad about this, you're mad about that, or we decide to come up with ways to progress, to make progress in this country, to put these biases aside, this racism aside, this discrimination aside. When we try to do these things and we come up with ways to show these are the reasons why this is happening, these are the reasons why over history this has been done, but we get shut down, just like I said last week with the Black Panther movement, with what they were, Black Panther Party, what they were doing in the community and how they were trying to help the community along, with Martin Luther King Jr., with the civil rights movement, with all the movements we had that they've tried to shut down, and they have to a certain extent. You have to give, say they have shut down, but then you have to ask, why are they continually shutting these things down? Why is there such an issue with us knowing what actually went on from slavery that is still affecting us today? What is the fear? What is the fear of putting that into the context when we talk about the United States of America before 1776, when it was just America, the Americas? I just don't, it's hard for me to fathom why it's so difficult, or why people don't want that part told, as far as we've come and what we are told to be true that there's no discrimination and different things like that. And let me bring this up real quick, and I'm gonna digress for a minute. I seen something the other day that I was watching, and the question was asked to, and I can't remember exactly who it was, and I don't want to put the wrong name out there, but basically the question was asked in this manner: why are African Americans and blacks and people of color asked the question of how do we end racism when we were not the ones to start racism? Now, I'm paraphrasing, but it goes in that context. Discrimination, racism, where, why is it on the African American and the black community to try to find a way to end racism and discrimination when we are not the perpetrators of the racism and the discrimination? Why is the onus on us to figure out what we need to do to eliminate it? It should fall on the backs, fall on the minds, fall on the people who created this separation, this racism, this discrimination, for them to figure it out in harmony with the African American and black community. You put the onus on us to figure it out, but you didn't put the onus on us to say when we wanted to be free. You put the onus on us to come up with a solution for all the things that go on in the world that against us. Case in point, when we come up with the movements, as I just mentioned. And then when we go out here and we try to come up with a way, you find every way you can to debunk it, to change it, to make it seem like it's not for good. Why? What is it? Why is it? And I go to the 5 W's one more time: the who, what, when, where, and why. And when you get into this 1619 project and you start reading it and you start really understanding what they were trying to do with this project, rather than erase 1776 and beyond, they want you to know what happened before 1776. As they say, the beginning. In the beginning. That's all. But when you get into the racism, discrimination, and they put the onus on us to figure out a way to make it go away, hell, we're not the ones that brought it. We're not the ones that started it, and we're not the ones that created it. But you want us to be the ones to solve it. I digress. Let me get back to the 1619 project. History or his story? History or his story? And I put that as this because with the 1619 project, and then you talk about the Declaration of Independence and Independence Day and all the things that have gone on that we know to be true, that we've been taught, whose history is that? Or is it just his story of what he wants to be told? How do we get to the point of people accepting what is real, as bad as it may be? How do we get people to accept it? Because at the end of the day, we may not ever get to the point where we're accepted, but respect the fact that I know where I started, I know what I've done, and I'm not going to continue to allow you to minimize my contributions to this country. So with the 1619 project, there's been a lot of political intervention in this. Republican Tim Cotton introduced a bill titled the Saving American History Act of 2020. The Saving American History Act of 2020, which aims to prohibit the use of federal funds to teach the 1619 project by kindergarten through 12th grade schools or school districts. Schools that teach the 1619 project would also be ineligible for federal professional development grants. What's the reason? What's the reason? The Saving American History Act of 2020. So what you're telling me by putting this in here, this bill that you're trying to introduce, you're telling me that Saving American History Act of 2020 does not include anything that happened from 1619 up until 1776? Or you're just saying from 1776 on? Because if that's the case, then you're not saving American history. You're leaving out a major part of American history. And notice he said American history. This was America before it was the United States of America. Right-leaning lawmakers in at least 5 states, Iowa, South Dakota, Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi, have introduced legislation that will prohibit schools from teaching the 1619 Project or cut funding from those that do. It all goes back to the funding. Once you threaten funding, people get scared. While most of the bills are unlikely to advance, Mississippi's legislation already is dead. Iowa this week advanced this proposal, which says curriculum inspired by the project attempts to deny or obfuscate the fundamental principles upon which the United States was founded. Those supporting the project say attempts to ban curriculum based on it are a form of censorship and prevent students from engaging in important discussions. Efforts to curb the project's impact in classrooms reached a federal level in the months leading up to former President Donald Trump's departure from the White House. Trump said at a White House conference in September that the project rewrites American history to teach our children that we were founded on the principle of oppression, not freedom. By contrast, Trump pushed a 1776 commission that encouraged communities reasserting control of how children receive patriotic education in their schools. So they countered. What he did was he took the 1619 Project and called it all kind of names and said it wasn't good for the paper it was written on, or however you want to express it. Said that it was rewriting and saying that this country was built more on oppression than freedom. But then at the same time, he goes out and creates a 1776 commission that encouraged communities to reassert control of how children receive patriotic education in their schools. While social studies curriculum has always been politically contested, the 1619 Project challenges tenets commonly endorsed by both parties, but particularly Republicans: American exceptionalism and faith in the free market. Crazy. Brian Hoodie, it should be taught with or without federal funds. Exactly. That was my next caveat. I appreciate that. We do not have to have our school districts, our education systems teach what we know our kids need to be taught. The onus falls on us to fill in the blanks with our children, for them to be able to speak eloquently and knowingly about the history of their people and what they have done for this country from 1619 to today. You can't leave out in the beginning. You cannot continue to leave out the first chapter. You cannot continue to do these things and call it history when in reality it's just his story. This is where we're at in the United States of America. And they call this, I hear these things about cancel culture and all this kind of stuff, but I don't have an understanding what cancel culture is, so I'm not going to get into that. But what I think it is when someone says something or someone does something and you just want to cancel them out like it's null and void. Well, isn't that what they're doing with the 1619 Project? During Black History Month, which we have 2 weeks left, another week. Download this PDF. If you have children, grandchildren, give it to them. Have them read it. Give them an understanding of what the 1619 Project is all about. You shouldn't have to wait for the school system to teach them the 1619 Project and what it all entails. We have to take responsibility for what we want our children to know, what do we want our grandchildren to know, and we need to take responsibility on what we know and how we know it, and fill in the blanks in our own minds, because the thing is, as time is going on, you always read different things and it changes your mindset about different things. And I always say this when I come on the show, most of the time. I haven't said it recently, But when I do these shows, I'm not here to change anyone's mind. But if I get you to think differently than you did before you tuned in this morning, then I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to give you the information. What you choose to do with it is up to you. It's the same thing with the 1619 Project. The information is there. Use it. Read it. If you don't believe in it, read it, let it go. But I guarantee if you read it, it will make some understanding to what are some of the things that you deal with today. It will deal with some of the things that you deal with today. We're going to go ahead and transition. That's the 1619 Project. History lesson for the day. Take the time, go back, look at the PDF, find out more about it. Mind, Body, and Soul segment. It's Black History Month in 2021 after the pandemic. You know, we got going on, but in 2021, we were going to take it one day at a time. We're taking it one day at a time. And we're talking about self-care. And this is a quote by James Baldwin. And it reads as such: "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Now, when we look at that quote and we think about change, most people get scared about change. Most of us hesitant about anything that deals with change. But when you talk about change, you have to face it, because if you don't face it, change can never be in the equation. And once you face it, the changes that can be made can be looked at in a clear light. And a lot of times, in my mindset, we need to switch it from being change to being a lifestyle improvement per se. You get into this and you ask yourself, the changes of history, the change in what we know about history. And in the big scope of things, I think you need to change it from talking about it being changed to enhancing the history that we've been taught. Taking the history that we know to be true, that has already been established, and fill in those blanks, as I've mentioned, of what we have not been told about our history. It goes along the same lines as your life. There are certain things in your life that you know need to be changed, but you avoid it. And the reason you avoid it is because you don't want to face it. And the only way you can make a change is you have to face it head on. You can't make a change by speaking about it. It's an action. The 1619 Project shows us that there is history that needs to be told. But for some reason, this United States of America and the powers that be per se choose to find more fault with the project than they do fact of the project. That's what we do in most of our cases, in most of our lives, is we try to disenfranchise the truth about what is real, to fit our narrative, to fit into what we want to happen. And 9 times out of 10, that change in the mindset that you make when you decide to face these things can change the dichotomy, not only of your thinking, but the thinking of others. Life is full of changes, but you have to face it. When I talked about the discrimination and the racism and why the onus is put on the African American and the Black community to figure out what we need to do. Notice I said what we need to do to get past it, to fix it, to get people of non-color on board on what we need to do going forward. The onus has always been put on us to right the wrongs of this country. Why is that? I'm going to go out on a limb, and I can't speak for those 20 to 30 people that came in 1619, but I'm going to say that they probably didn't come by choice. And they had no choice in the way that they were dealt with in 1619 up until the day they died when they got here. But at the end of the day, why was it their responsibility? And why was the onus put on them to figure out a better way for them to get out of slavery? Why was the onus put on everyone you can think of, from Frederick Douglass to Martin Luther King to Malcolm X to all the figures and everybody, including yourself, to come up with ways to make people accept you for who you are and judge you by the content of your character? Why is the onus on you to make people look at you differently and treat you differently because of who you are? Why is that burden on you? These are some of the changes that we need to face, that the onus is not on the African-American community to change your mind. You have to change your mind. And as I mentioned last week, the mindset of the government, the country, and I'm going to bring some statistics that I brought up last week. When we talk about change, you have to face it. Nothing can be changed until it is faced. But they had no problem when it came to facing Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement, all the other movements, the Black Panther Party, the Black Lives Matter movement. They had no problem facing that change to change it to the narrative that they wanted. Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. They had no problem facing the change that they wanted to change the narrative of what they were doing and why they were doing it. But none of this effort is put into changing the mentality and understanding that racism and discrimination is not a problem of the African-American community. It's a problem with the people who choose to be racist and discriminatory. And until you decide to change your thinking and your mindset, no matter what I do as a man of color, to try to change your mind, it's not going to happen. Why? Because you haven't faced the fact of what changes need to be made. Because you're comfortable with the status quo. And the status quo is, as long as it's not affecting me, then it's not an issue with me. And the change that you're talking about does not need to happen. Change. How do we get past it? The only way you get past it, it starts within. But you have to face it. Let me read it one more time before we go. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Appreciate everybody tuning in today. We had some, still praying for the people in Texas. Hopefully everything will get back to normal in the next couple of days. Hopefully they'll be able to recover, get on their feet, keep doing what they're doing. Also on the 1619 project, I'm going to post that. As I mentioned, I'm going to post that today so you can pull that PDF, look at it. Even if you just don't even have an interest in it, find some time. We find time for everything else. Find time to look at what gaps that they're trying to fill in, what you truly didn't understand about from 1619 to 1776. Because as I keep mentioning, there's always a beginning. 1776 was not the beginning. 1776 was the beginning of the United States of America, but it was not the beginning of slavery on American soil. Read it. I appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll be back again next week. I got one more. Not sure what next week's lesson is going to be for Black History Month, but trust me, it's going to be something that's going to make your mind think about it. I appreciate everybody tuning in. And as I always mention, first of all, let me say this. Reach out to your friends, get them to like the show, get them to like the page, get them tuned in. Because what we're trying to do is build this. We're trying to get this to a point where we understand where we are, who we are, and what we're about. The 5 W's, the who, what, when, where's, and why's. And like I say, I'm not the end all to be all, but I just want to be a voice. I just want to be a voice that lets you know what's going on, and a voice that makes you think differently than you did before you turned it on in the morning. L. Harwell, despite major criticism criticism of the 1619 project. Schools around the country have been incorporating the project into curricula: Chicago, DC, Buffalo, New York, Newark, New Jersey. Exactly. And here's the thing, El, and I'm just gonna bring it out. If you see when I mentioned the the states where they don't want it taught, it deals with Iowa, South Dakota, Missouri, Arkansas, and Mississippi. And then you mentioned Chicago, DC, Buffalo, New York, Newark, New Jersey. Let's look at the demographics in those states, cities, compared to the demographics in Iowa, South Dakota, Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi. And the ironic thing about Iowa, don't make me forget her name. Nicole Jones. Is that her name? I'm sorry, y'all. Let me get this because I got to make this point. Nicole Hannah Jones is from Iowa, born and raised in Iowa, and they don't even want to use the curricula in her school district where she was born and raised. Just tells you where the mindset is. Be blessed always. Appreciate you, bro. Appreciate you. Thanks, L. Hartwell, for your input and everything. Appreciate everybody. Like I said, appreciate everybody tuning in. Next week, I have another history lesson for you for this Black History Month. We're going to wrap it up this Black History Month next week. So as I always say before I sign off, I was mentioning, have your friends reach out, like the page, do everything they got to do, put the word out. It's on YouTube. You can share the YouTube link, share the Facebook. Let's get people involved and let's get some more interaction going on. Because we're going to take this to another level coming up after Black History Month. I got some things in mind that I'm trying to finalize, but we're going to make this thing happen. We're going to continue doing what we're doing. Good morning, my sister. Good morning. Good morning, April Weeden. Appreciate the support. Love you, L. Hartwell. Appreciate it. Be blessed. All right. As I said, let me get off here. Love yourself. Love one another. Keep your head up. And most definitely, keep your faith in God. I'll see y'all on the video and I'll see y'all on the radio. I love y'all. Have an awesome week. Appreciate y'all. And I'm out. Peace.